This is Leonard Walker coming to you from the land of Israel's live satellite communication. We're bringing you a news doctrine. This is news documentary. Excuse me. We're going to be covering the life and of Jephthah and his daughter. Um, Today, I want to look at the incidents around the sacrifice of Jephthah's daughter. This story it relates to victory. It relates to rising from insignificant means to greatness. It relates to family abuse. It relates to tragedy. Jephthah was someone who um, rose to the position as the ninth judge in Israel. And as we look at this, we can see that the insignificant means I'm talking about is that he started out in life as a child whose mother was a prostitute, very well known in her local village called Gilead. Now, Jephthah's father was married at the time, and by the woman he was at that time he was presently married to, he had several sons. But he met Jephthah's mother, who was the prostitute in the area, and the two of them got together and thus produced Jephthah. Then he was known as an illegitimate child. He was abused, misused by in very hostile manners by his brothers. His brothers were so vicious toward him that as he became older, this created a fear in them that indeed it was no longer enough to harass him, but they caused him to flee his home in Gilead to go to a nearby town because of the fact that they did not want him to gain any inheritance upon their father's death. Um, Jephthah being forced from his home, being seen as an illegitimate child, being seen as unworthy to inherit his anything from his father's fortunes. He then took up with some questionable characters. He then took up with men of low morale. He then took up with uh, the bandits in that area. This is on the outskirts of Gilead, where he became the leader of these men. And I'm going to say this is not anything unusual because we see this in gangs, youth gangs today. We see this happen where these youth gangs become the families of these said youth who have been forced from their home by various means, such as abuse, neglect, or just family conflict of interest. Here he has now become part of an extended family, and they raid the villages throughout the countryside and have made a reputation for themselves. Jephthah is seen as someone that is a capable leader. He is seen as someone who is courageous. He is seen as someone who is not afraid of battle. Um, it's interesting that the elders of Gilead approached Jephthah to ask him to deliver them from the hands of the Amorites. And so here it is, and you'll see that story there in Judges 11th chapter, first verse, through the 12th chapter, 7th verse. And it'll give you a pretty in-depth reading. I would say read the 10th chapter also, and you'll really get a good overview of this story. And so then he was propositioned by the elders of Gilead, the same town where he had been initially ran out by his family in order to keep him from inheriting anything from his father upon his father's death. So then now the same town is asking him to provide protection for them against their enemies, the Amorites. Well, the Ammonites, excuse me. Well, uh, Jephthah, who now is politically savvy, has picked up quite a bit of political understanding um, in his dealings with his extended family, and of course, from him going through various family conflicts before he left home. The illegitimate child now is someone that those that look down on him is someone who is seen as possibly being able to provide protection from their enemies, the town of Gilead. And so then that's nothing unusual either. Just let me add, for instance, you see in certain Western movies where um, the outlaw is sought after to be the sheriff in order to fight against the outlaws uh, um, that is oppressing the town. Now, once the sheriff has successfully put down the oppression of the those who are outlaws themselves, the town, once it begins to grow, once it begins to prosper, because now they can resume their economic activities because of growth, because they no longer are under oppression of the enemy or the outlaws. But then what happens is that sheriff does not fit into their plans. But when they needed him, they found his special abilities and talents to be just what they needed. Well, Jephthah is now politically savvy, and I would say not only was he going to be their protector, but now, after being forced from his family, now being forced into securing financial resources the best way he can, now he makes the plan, as I see this, that he's not going to be slighted anymore. And the way he does that is that he makes them a proposal that if you appoint me leader, chieftain over Gilead, if I should come through with this victory over the Ammonites, then I'll do this. And that to me says that he has attempted to secure a position of worth uh, 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 in this whole thing. And he then attempts to put the enemy down, put the oppression of the enemy down by peaceful means. He tries to negotiate. And of course, the elders beforehand did agree with his proposal of being the chieftain if he should win this battle. So now he makes the move to attempt and put the oppression of the enemy down by peaceful means, and you'll see this in Judges 11 and 29. But then they refuse. So now he's forced to attack them, and he brings a great slaughter against the oppressors. And you'll see this in Judges 11 and 33. Um, it was during this time that Jephthah, he made the vow to God that if he had made him victorious, he has previously made this vow in Judges 11 and 31, that if the Lord would make him victorious in this thing, that when he returned to his home, the first thing that would come out, he would sacrifice, provide a burnt offering to God. So then he is victorious. And when he returns home, the first thing to come out of his house is his daughter, his only child. And this is in Judges 11 and 34. Jephthah tears his clothes and cries, "Alas, my daughter, you have bought me very low. I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." Judges 11 and 35. Jephthah's daughter asks for 2 months. That is, she says, that I may go up and down the mountains and weep for my virginity. Judges 11 and 37. So Jephthah did with her according to his vow he had made. Judges 11 and 39. Now this story of Jephthah killing his daughter stands in contrast to the binding of Isaac in the book of Genesis, chapters 22, verses 1 through 3, wherein Abraham was about to carry out a divinely ordered sacrifice of his only son Isaac, but God was the one that directed him to do so. And it was also God who divinely intervened to prevent him from killing Isaac. And in this, with Jephthah, I read nowhere in the story where God had told him to sacrifice his daughter. Neither did I read when Jephthah prayed that God had answered him, that his vow was accepted. But then during this time, men did as their mind led them. They did what seemed right in their own eyes. The religious worship of the Israelites had fell to a primitive state. And so I encourage you to read your Bible and read it with the intent to understand it, so that you're not simply doing what's right in your own eyesight. So what I want to do is have a couple of comments from the mouth of babes, that do they believe if Jephthah could have did something different in his vow, would God have allowed that? Or was it acceptable? Was he right to kill, to sacrifice his daughter? Won't you come now? We have our first one by Mr. Ahmad. So what do you think, Ahmad?
I think that he shouldn't have killed his daughter, because God didn't tell him that that was what he was supposed to do, and he could have easily picked something else instead of his daughter.
Okay, okay, thank you, Ahmad. That's from the mouth of babes from Ahmad. Now we have Ajane. Have her opinion, what she thinks. You go ahead.
I think that Jephthah shouldn't have offered his daughter as a sacrifice, because number one, God never gave him the consent to continue to what he was doing like he did Abraham. This is more of his choice to. This is more of what he would have thought that God would have said, but God never actually gave him permission.
Not according to the word, as we said. Thank you, Ajane. And that's what we have today. God bless you. God keep you. May the Lord shine upon you. Thank you.